we have a real war hero. Excuse me, Representative Mike Waltz. And Mike Waltz is a combat veteran. Mike, how are you, sir?
Good, Mark. Thanks for having me on, and just, here in the swamp trying to stop stupid from happening.
Yeah, well, good luck. We're going to need to bring in the infantry, which is the American people, in 2022. But I'll tell you what, I know you're worried about many of these things. I've been talking about China for a very, very long time, as well as Iran. And people used to dismiss Russia. What's the big deal with Russia? Big deal is Russia's our enemy. So let's take this piece by piece if we can. Let's start with communist China. They are now making threats and saying things in a way that they have never said before to the United States of America. They have no regard for this man, I think, after Afghanistan and after this pipeline stuff. But the more they monitor us internally, and they see that this is a nation that's torn asunder by what I call these American Marxists, particularly a group of them in your house there, in the House of Representatives. They That's see right. we're not serious about building up the United States military. The budget's literally flat. And we're not focused on it as a nation. We don't have a president who's a commander-in-chief who's talking to the American people about the threats that are rising about that thing. And that's all provocative, isn't it?
No, it's absolutely right. And just to put it in a little more context, look, I don't think, America needs a wake-up call. The American people need to wake up to the fact, and here's just a couple of data points. The Chinese Navy is now larger than the United States Navy. More ships and newer ships. They are launching more into space than the rest of the world combined, including the United States. They're on track to have a separate space station and a manned station on the moon within the next decade that will all be militarized and prepared to attack the United States. And, just don't take it from us, Mark, or even from me. Listen to President Xi's speeches, where he is openly talking about replacing the United States as a global leader, replacing capitalism and democracy with their form of socialism and communism as the superior system. They just launched a hypersonic weapon that is a first-strike nuclear weapon that we can't defend against. But the thing that has me so damn mad is they're doing it with our money. It's our money that is funding their military buildup, their debt diplomacy, their Belt and Road Initiative, where they're taking up power grids and ports and airports all over the world. And, between Wall Street, between Hollywood, between the sports industry, our trade deficit, which President Trump, knew and got on top of, historians are going to look back and say the American people and the American tax dollars funded their greatest adversaries. So my call to action to so many is, if you see Made in China, put it down. I've reached out to my financial advisor and told him to divest. Get us out of investing into the Chinese economy, but we have a long way to go, Mark. And this is right around the corner. I think case in point is what I'm calling the Genocide Olympics. I was the first in the House to call for a full boycott, not just this symbolic gesture Biden just threw out of the diplomatic boycott. Like, the Chinese Communist Party could care less whether a few U.S. officials come or go, but a full boycott. The U.S. corporations that stand to make millions, and yes, even the athletes themselves, and the International Olympic Committee should be ashamed of itself for ignoring this genocide and ignoring the human rights abuses that are going on, and ignoring the cover-up of COVID. And to see the American flag in just a few months flying in Beijing, despite all of that, sickens me in my stomach.
In ways, it reminds me of the 1936 Olympics. This isn't in any respect great parallels with the Holocaust, but I'm talking about the rise of this regime, the rise of the fact that the West is really feckless. It's like they're like ostriches. Their head is in the sand. I mean,
Right.
You got one group, the Women's Tennis Associations, that's standing up. Well, where's the Men's Tennis Association? Where are those tough guys on the NBA and the NFL? Where are any of these people? Right. And I think what I would say, Mike Waltz, is the American corporations, not all, are the most un-American corporations. Let me put it this way, the most un-American businesses in American history. You're exactly right. They're funding the enemy. They get subsidized, whether it's Hollywood, whether it's professional sports, whether it's Wall Street. I go even further. Colleges and universities, politicians in this country. I've never seen anything like this. We see the growing threat. We should learn from history. China's making no bones about what they intend to do. They're threatening Japan, the Philippines, Vietnam. They're obviously threatening Taiwan. They've destroyed Hong Kong. And let me ask you this. What's North Korea going to do if they see an invasion of Taiwan with a really a useless response from the United States? You think they're going to sit on their hands when it comes to South Korea?
Well, I mean, what's North Korea, what's Iran, what's China going to do if they see in just the next few months Russia invade Ukraine and Biden, just like Obama did the last time they did it, throw blankets and MREs at the problem? But, to your point on the Olympics, dictators love the Olympics. We all know what Hitler did after 1936, but fewer people realize that the last time the Ukraine was invaded, Putin invaded the Ukraine just a few months after the 2014 Olympics in Sochi, because they love it, because it is a propaganda platform, and everybody attending, the entire world, is turning a blind eye to their abuses, to their authoritarianism. It emboldens them. And I do fear for Taiwan in the wake of the Beijing Olympics, which is coming in February. But just one other point, Mark, the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, says, well, we don't do politics. And you hear so many people, left and right, both parties, saying, well, what about the athletes and what have you? Let me ask you this. If the United States government had 1 million Muslims in concentration camps, do you think those athletes would be demanding to compete? Heck no. They would be out protesting. So why is it different then if China is doing it? And the other piece is the IOC had no problem getting into politics throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s when they boycotted South Africa over apartheid. Not only did they not allow an Olympics in South Africa, they banned the South African Olympic team from participating anywhere for 30 years. But, I guess it's okay when it comes to apartheid in South Africa, but it's, for them to get involved there. But they're going to turn a blind eye when it comes to these gross atrocities that are happening all over the world, including inside China. So, and I think the answer is, as you and I well know, it's all about the money. And the level of corruption at the IOC, I think, eclipses the World Health Organization. It's disgusting, and we're going to continue to call it out at every turn.
Now, Congressman, if you have an obligation, I understand. If not, I'd like to hold you over one more segment. It's up to you.
Oh, absolutely, Mark, of course.
Because I want to pursue some of these a little bit more. Great Congressman Mike Waltz. I'm glad he's there. We'll be right back with him. Representative Mike Waltz is our guest, and you can tell he's quickly becoming a star in the House among Republicans. And the reason is he's not just smart. He not only served our country, that would be enough, but he's serving it again. And he is he's in the coal mine there, and he's warning people over and over and over again. And I think it's being heard, except by this administration. Mike Waltz, I think this administration really doesn't know what to do, because they don't want to use the military in any competent way. Let me do it this way. I look at the state of Israel. The state of Israel now has to make a decision. They've been told by the Biden administration, do not strike Iran.
Right.
And yet they need to have the surprise of offensive attack if they're going to defeat a country like this. And so they have to make a decision, their survival or the survival of the relationship with the current U.S. government. I mean, it's preposterous, don't you think?
Yeah, no, it absolutely is, Mark. And what you're seeing is, the same team that was around Obama is now around Biden. I call it the O-Biden team. And Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, Blinken, Feiner, Austin, all of them. These are the same the same individuals who thought it was a great idea to do the trade for Berghdal. I had to lead the search for him on the ground as a special operator, and we got people killed. The Iran deal was a good, was a good deal. The full withdrawal from Iraq with nothing left behind, we get the ISIS caliphate. The opening with getting nothing in return to Cuba and Venezuela. So the whole world knows it. These were all acolytes of Susan Rice and of John Kerry, who both of which, by the way, still have offices in the West Wing and are lurking around. And their foreign policy, regardless of the region of the world, is underscored by two fundamental flaws. Number one, the United States of America is more of a problem than it is a solution, and therefore needs to be pulled back. And number two, if we can just concede enough and be nice enough and turn our other cheek enough, that our adversaries will be nice back to us and will come to the table. And you and I well know that authoritarian regimes, whether it's the Iranian regime or Putin, are emboldened by perceived weakness. They're deterred by strength. And right now they just smell weakness in the White House. And Mark, I was just out at the Reagan library for the Reagan Forum, and Brett Baer and Hemmer and others, and it was just such a reminder of why we need moral clarity, clear red lines, and a clear denunciation of the costs if you cross the United States. And we're getting none of that right now, and we're going to see none of that in Biden's call with Putin tomorrow. And if there's ever a time to pull in the principles of Reagan of strength, the peace is kept through strength. It's now, and it's no doubt that the world is on fire. Once again, just as it was under Obama, now with the same team in around Biden.
And, we talk about Reagan. The problem is Biden was around then, and Biden opposed Reagan on everything. So you have him. You even have McCain, who I didn't agree with about much, but he says Blinken should never be Secretary of State, and he'd fight like hell to stop him. Blinken is a disaster. This guy Sullivan is a disaster. Obviously, yeah. Biden is a disaster. Kamala Harris has some issues, boy. That's a separate issue. We have probably in my view, the weakest brass at the Pentagon in my lifetime. Absolutely the weakest to leave American citizens in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is really one of the things, other than the election of Biden himself, is certainly one of the things that is provoking these enemies, don't you think?
Well, if you look at what's going on right now with the most massive buildup on the Ukrainian border by Putin and Russia, and potentially, I think likely, the most significant ground invasion in Europe since World War II, it's no coincidence that it's happening under Joe Biden. The last time they got away with it was in Crimea with Obama Biden. It's no coincidence that it happens in the wake of Afghanistan. It's no coincidence that it's happening in the wake of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline coming online, which Biden essentially allowed to happen because they know, Putin knows in the winter that he can starve Ukraine of gas and then he can hold Germany and others hostage by threatening to starve them of gas. And Biden, as Mark, he's allowed all of this to happen. So this, I really think he is on the precipice of becoming the Neville Chamberlain of American history, where just concession after concession, just as Neville Chamberlain shrugged his shoulders and turned his back on Czechoslovakia, on Poland, walked down the line. Eventually it was France, Great Britain, and threatening the United States. And I think we need to really explain this because to everyday Americans just trying to get their kids off to school, in Daytona, Florida, why does Ukraine matter? Well, it matters because we are on a slippery slope to total world chaos, and the Iranian regime's watching, the Chinese are watching, and certainly other dictatorships around the world are watching, and the North Koreans are watching, and this is what we're about to get.
The difference is we have Neville Chamberlain as an example, what not to do, right? He did not have Neville Chamberlain. Here's the thing. We signed onto a deal that people never talk about. I've been watching the news media late at night. We signed the 1994 Budapest Memorandum with the Ukrainians, as did the Russians and the British. And Ukraine had the third largest nuclear armaments after the breakup of the Soviet Union of any country on the face of the earth, more than France, China, even Britain combined. So in order to give up those weapons, a deal was made with Russia, Great Britain, and the United States to protect Ukraine's sovereignty and independence and its safety. 1994.
That's right.
It gave up its nuclear weapons. Now it has a very, compared to Russia, a very limited conventional force, in part due to us, quite frankly, not willing to give them offensive weaponry. And Ukraine is naked, pretty much. And so when people say, I heard a news guy say, somebody I like, we have no obligation. What are you talking about? They signed that deal because we urged them, and the Russians agreed to it.
No, you're absolutely right. In the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1990, there was a huge concern about some of its satellite, some of its satellite states, Belarus, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, where the Soviets had placed portions of their nuclear arsenal. It wasn't 100% clear, really who was in charge in Russia for a few years, much less in these satellite states. And so the largest portion outside of Russia was in Ukraine. The United States leaned heavily on this brand new government and democracy to do the right thing and give up those nukes with the promise, the solemn promise, from the United States and Great Britain that we would defend their territorial integrity. Again, it's a classic and tragic example of no good deed goes unpunished. The new Ukrainian government did the right thing, and Barack Obama broke that promise when Putin invaded Crimea and invaded eastern Ukraine, and we literally, again, threw blankets at the problem and MREs at the problem, and wouldn't give them a single bullet, much less a missile. But you know who did was Donald Trump, who gave them anti-tank missiles, who gave them lethal aid, who really stepped in, and despite all the, Russiagate and all the accusations that he was an agent and, all of that nonsense, it was Donald Trump who stepped in, not only in Ukraine, but in Syria. More Russians died as they tried to attack our forces in Syria under Donald Trump than in any other president in the Cold War, when 300 Russian mercenaries met the United States Air Force when they tried to attack our special forces. So, but you're right, that Putin once again knows the same weak crowd is back in charge. He's doing this because he knows he can get away with it. And he's doing this because he knows for sanctions and other responses to really bite, you have to be on the same page as the Europeans. The sanctions only work if they are hit with dollars and euros. And as long as he's holding Western Europe hostage now in the middle of winter with its gas through the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, he knows he'll fracture NATO and get away with it.
So what do we do now? I think I know what we do now. I know what Reagan would have done now. Why don't we learn from Reagan and so forth? He would arm the Ukrainians up to the teeth, and he would do it starting right now, and he would do it 24/7. You don't have to go to war directly with the Russians. If they're going to invade the Ukrainians, give them half a chance to defend themselves and to inflict harm on the Russians. Now, if the Russians think that's an act of war, that's their problem. The fact of the matter is they're building hypersonic weapons, too. The fact of the matter is they're in the North Pole. The fact of the matter is they're flying their bombers off our coast. The fact of the matter is they're very, very aggressive right now. And it just seems to me either we step up here, we're going to have these constant challenges taking place. We have about 2 minutes. You go ahead.
Well, no, that's absolutely right. I mean, what do we do now? We turn Ukraine into a porcupine. And the biggest thing they've been asking for is air defense weapons, is Stinger missiles. I want to be clear. I don't think you're calling, and nor am I, for American, hundreds of thousands of American boots on the ground defend Ukraine. But there's a lot we can do to help them defend themselves. But the key, Mark, is
no, the
that message
opposite.
needs
I'm
to be
saying
delivered.
we give these people the ability to defend themselves with weaponry.
I'm saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But that message needs to be delivered right now. We need to get inside Putin's calculus today that the costs are going to be high. Don't do this. And instead, I think you're going to have this just kind of, lack of a better term, weak sauce phone call tomorrow that Putin, ironically, is going to use to his advantage. He's going to say, the President of the United States asked me not to do this, and I did it anyway. So if you're not prepared to put that strength and that clarity on the table, don't have the call, because it's actually going to do more harm than good.
Congressman, keep up the fight. We'll give you we'll give you the air cover here, and God bless you for everything you've done and you do. Thank you very,
all right,
very
Mark.
much.
Well, this country's worth fighting for. Thanks so much.
Amen. You take care of yourself too. That's a real man right there.